The question is asked, is there anything more beautiful in life than a young boy and a young girl clasping clean hands and pure hearts in the path of marriage? Can there be anything more beautiful than young love? Let's consider a little episode in this week's Torah portion. We're told about how Jacob encounters both girls, Rachel and Leah. And the Torah tells us that Rachel was particularly beautiful, but Leah's eyes were weak. And then the Torah says that Jacob loved Rachel. Are we to assume that he was so superficial as to go for the girl who was beautiful and ignore the girl whose eyes were otherwise weak? Our sages explain to us that the reason why Leah's eyes were weak was because she was constantly crying. You see, Rebekah had two sons, Esau, the evil villain, and Jacob, the righteous one. Her brother Laban had two daughters, Rachel and Leah. So people typically said Leah, the older girl, will marry Esau, and Rachel, the younger girl, will end up marrying Jacob. Hearing this, that always provoked tears from Leah, such that she walked around crying, and her eyes became weak as a result. Now, the real issue over here is as follows. Eyes are the windows of the soul. It's one thing to be a little bit perturbed about the fact that people are saying this about you, but to be so self-consumed to a point where you're constantly crying, to a point where your eyes actually become weak, that becomes something of a problem. And therefore, inasmuch as eyes are windows to the soul, Jacob sees those weak eyes of Leah, and what he sees essentially is a certain kind of self-obsession, if you will, a certain kind of selfishness. On the other hand, we know that Rachel, in contrast, was someone who personified pure, altruistic selflessness. We know that when they were switched under the chuppah, such that Jacob was supposed to marry Rachel, but Leah was put under the chuppah instead, and Rachel passed on signs to Leah that were otherwise given to her by Jacob, knowing that this swindle might take place. She did something so utterly selfless, waiting 7 years to marry the man of her dreams, and now giving those signs to her daughter to spare her the embarrassment is a true testament to her selfless character. You see, in essence, every marriage is a selfless act, where each partner is taking their own life, which until that point was entirely their own, and now committing it to the other. And still, even in that context, people mistakenly assume that marriage is a give and take relationship. It's not. Marriage is a give and give relationship, because if you're going to be giving and then constantly keeping one eye on what you're receiving in return, then invariably you're going to have some kind of conflict that ensues as a result. But if you focus only on what you're giving, and each spouse ensures to do so, then invariably you're both going to be receiving as well, albeit in an entirely selfless framework. True love means that you and I are connected at a level where our emotions are intertwined and so deeply connected that we genuinely feel each other's joys and pains. Like the rabbi who once took his wife with him to the doctor with her painful leg and said, "Doctor, my wife's leg is hurting us." It is with that attitude of selflessness that marriage can endure for many long and blissful years. That is what Jacob identified in Rachel, and what he saw in the weak eyes of Leah was otherwise lacking. Is there anything more beautiful than young love? Yes, it's the spectacle of an older man and an older woman finishing their journey together on that same path. Their hearts are bent but still clasped. Their faces are wrinkled but still radiant. Everything about them might seem on the external to be that much older, but they're still strong and young with love and devotion for one another. There's only one thing more beautiful than young love, and that is old love. That is what Jacob demonstrates to us in his marriages with Rachel and Leah. Shabbat Shalom.